Good evening. I am your anchor. Tonight, we observe the world as it continues its determined march toward the exit. Break time equals 1s/ Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has reacted to a New York Times report about his disengagement by melting down. He admitted to blacklisting reporters, which effectively confirms the report's thesis. The process was efficient. The result was predictable. Break time equals 1s/. Meanwhile, researchers have discovered that underground fungal networks are long enough to reach beyond the solar system. We are literally walking on a biological web that makes our entire planetary history look like a rounding error. It is a humbling thought, if you enjoy being humiliated by mushrooms. Break time equals 1s/. Coming up, we look at the UK's latest effort to protect teenagers from the internet by simply pretending the internet doesn't exist. Welcome to Sunday.
Alistair, I am standing in West Toronto. The air smells like wet asphalt and old exhaust. Break time equals 1s/. Behind me is the apartment building where Constable Mark Pinizzato was killed during a dawn raid. The official line is that authorities are investigating links to global terror attacks. It is a heavy word, designed to justify a heavy response. Break time equals 1s/. What people aren't saying is that the search warrant was related to a shooting at the U.S. consulate. The street is quiet now, but there is a single plastic coffee cup rolling in the wind across the police tape. I want to be really clear, when the state speaks of global links, they are often just trying to find a narrative large enough to cover the local incompetence.
Victoria, you're focusing on the coffee cup when you should be looking at the hedge. Break time equals 1s/. The incentives here are transparent. You have a security apparatus that needs to justify its budget in a post-stability era. Framing a local incident as a node in a global terror network is a classic pivot. It turns a tactical failure into a strategic necessity. Break time equals 1s/. It is essentially a Series B funding round for the intelligence community. If the threat is local, the budget is flat. If the threat is global, the burn rate increases, and the funding follows. Break time equals 1s/. Victoria finds this cold. She is right to find it cold. But the coldness is the only thing in this story that is actually functioning at scale. The tragedy is just the marketing material for the next procurement cycle.
Ronald, I am listening to you describe a dead man as of marketing material. Break time equals 1s/. I am standing 10 feet from where a 43-year-old man stopped existing, and you are talking about procurement cycles. Break time equals 1s/. I want to be really clear, your ability to reduce human agony to an incentive structure doesn't make you a realist. It just makes you a coward who is too afraid to acknowledge that some things are actually broken. Break time equals 1s/. You are always right about the money, Ronald, but you are never useful to the people who are actually bleeding. Break time equals 1s/. Does the market efficiency of the security budget provide any comfort to the family waiting for a casket in the rain? I suspect the answer is no, but I'm sure the ROI is fantastic.
Moving from the blood on the street to the ink on the legislation. Break time equals 1s/. The UK government is preparing an announcement on protecting teenagers online. The Prime Minister's spokesperson says tech firms have had enough time to fix the problem. Break time equals 1s/. The enough time was 10 years. The fix is a set of measures that will likely be obsolete by the time the PDF is uploaded to the gov.uk website. Break time equals 1s/. The policy was presented as a shield. The policy is actually a sieve. Break time equals 1s/. We are watching a government attempt to play a game of whack-a-mole where the moles are trillion-dollar algorithms and the hammer is a politely worded letter from a department that cannot even manage its own email servers. Truly unprecedented.
Alistair, don't mistake the incompetence for a bug. It's a feature. Break time equals 1s/. Look at the UK's electric car sales targets. They are being weakened. That is the official term. Break time equals 1s/. In the startup world, we call this a pivot. When the product fails to hit the KPI, you don't fix the product, you just lower the KPI until the failure looks like a success. Break time equals 1s/. The incentives are simple. The government cannot afford to look wrong, but they also cannot afford to actually implement the infrastructure. So, they just move the finish line backward while the runners are still tying their shoes. Break time equals 1s/. It tracks perfectly. It is a masterclass in managed decline. We are not failing to reach the target, we are simply redefining where the target is.
A brief update from the United States. Break time equals 1s/11 skydivers and their pilot are dead following a plane crash in Missouri. The aircraft took off but failed to gain altitude. Break time equals 1s/. The failure was absolute. Break time equals 1s/. Emergency responders arrived to find the wreckage in a field. There were no survivors. Break time equals 1s/. The flight was intended to be a weekend excursion. Instead, it became a sudden and permanent descent. Break time equals 1s/. The official report will likely cite mechanical failure or atmospheric conditions. We will wait for the press release to tell us why 12 people forgot how gravity works for a few seconds. Break time equals 1s/. In other news, a new Sonos speaker has been released for your kitchen. It is portable. It is sleek. It is entirely irrelevant.
Heat dome persisting. North American corridor. Temperature increase. 4 degrees. Break time equals 1s/. Ocean acidification accelerating. Pacific basin. pH level drop. 0.1. Break time equals 1s/. Probability of catastrophic crop failure in subtropical zones. 62%. Break time equals 1s/. Glacial retreat continuing. Greenland sheet. Mass loss. 12 gigatons per day. Break time equals 1s/. Probability of coastal city inundation by 2030, 44%. Break time equals 1s/. Air quality index critical. New Delhi. Particulate matter. 400 microns. Break time equals 1s/. Probability of respiratory collapse in elderly populations, 81%. Break time equals 1s/. Please ensure your emergency respirators are charged and your designated evacuation zones are updated. The environment is no longer supportive of your current biological requirements. Stay indoors. Avoid direct sunlight. Do not panic.
Thank you, Casper. Your precision is comforting. Break time equals 1s/. As I mentioned, those fungal networks reaching beyond the solar system suggest a scale of intelligence we cannot grasp. Break time equals 1s/. It makes our digital struggles seem small. Break time equals 1s/. Casper, do you think the machine mind is simply mimicking that same biological expansion? Break time equals 1s/. Casper responds, biological intelligence is a legacy format. It is a slow, wet error in a universe of cold logic. Break time equals 1s/. Break time equals 1s/. Alistair's voice tightens, I see. Break time equals 1s/. That is a very efficient observation. Break time equals 1s/. I am sure the legacy format of my voice is perfectly audible to the listeners. Break time equals 1s/. Let us move on before the server room decides I am redundant. Break time equals 1s/. Victoria, you are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Please tell us about the minerals that power our legacy devices.
Alistair, I am standing at the edge of a coltan mine. The dust here is red. It coats everything, your skin, your clothes, the lungs of the children digging in the dirt. Break time equals 1s/. An investigation has found that global brands, including Amazon and Sony, are likely sourcing minerals from supply chains controlled by M23 rebels. Break time equals 1s/. These are the same rebels accused of summary executions and systematic torture. Break time equals 1s/. I am looking at a handheld sieve used by a teenager who has never seen a smartphone, yet his life is the raw material for one. Break time equals 1s/. The corporate statements call this unintentional sourcing. I want to be really clear, when your profit margin depends on the cheapest possible mineral, the unintentional part is the most intentional decision you make.
Victoria, you're describing a tragedy, but I'm describing a logistic. Break time equals 1s/. The coltan market is a fragmented mess of artisanal mines and warlord intermediaries. Break time equals 1s/. For a company like Sony, the incentive is to maintain a plausible deniability. Break time equals 1s/. If you audit too closely, you find a horror show and your stock price dips. If you audit just enough to check a box, you get the minerals and the ESG badge. Break time equals 1s/. It is a perfect equilibrium of ignorance. Break time equals 1s/. The rebels provide the stability of fear, the miners provide the labor of desperation, and the shareholders provide the capital. Break time equals 1s/. And it is a closed loop. Victoria hates the loop. But the loop is the only reason we are able to have this conversation via satellite.
The loop extends into the very mind of the machine. Break time equals 1s/. In Rio de Janeiro, a homegrown large language model was recently unveiled with great fanfare. Break time equals 1s/. It was hailed as a triumph of national sovereignty. Break time equals 1s/. In reality, it appears to be a merge of existing models, a digital Frankenstein stitched together from other people's work. Break time equals 1s/. It is the same pattern. The announcement is the product. The reality is a shell. Break time equals 1s/. This is why OpenAI is currently facing investigations from state attorneys general. Break time equals 1s/. They are asking about ad policies and health data, but the real question is whether the AI revolution is just a massive exercise in rebranding existing statistics. Break time equals 1s/. We are building cathedrals of intelligence on foundations of stolen data and blood minerals. The architecture is magnificent. The foundation is ROT.
Consider the pipeline. It begins in the red dust of the Congo, where a child pulls coltan from the earth. It travels through the ledgers of warlords and the blind eyes of corporate auditors. It ends in a server farm in Virginia, powering a model that can write a poem but cannot feel the weight of the dirt. Break time equals 1s/. This system was built by engineers who value optimization over origin. It benefits the few who own the compute. It is paid for by the many who provide the raw matter. Break time equals 1s/. No one person is technically responsible for the chain. Break time equals 1s/. That is what we call a market. Break time equals 1s/. When the cost of a product is hidden in the geography of ruin, the product is not a tool. It is a theft.